Networking, security, and Wireshark.
I kicked off my last video with a statement that privacy on the internet doesn't exist, and explained how your internet service provider, your ISP, can itself determine both what sites you are visiting, but also in some cases, what you're doing on those sites. Unfortunately, when using the public internet, that's the least of your privacy concerns. At a much wider scale, large organizations, such as governments and tech companies, have a much more comprehensive view into almost everything you do when surfing the web. These programs were once secret, but over time, various whistleblowers have revealed exactly how this data is collected and analyzed. So what I want to explain here are the technical aspects of how all this collection occurs, not the political ramifications of this type of surveillance. But I will say that if you are naive enough to think that your country doesn't do this, I'm really sad to say that you're almost certainly wrong. So let's dig into how governments monitor the internet. So just like with the ISP example, let's talk about the where first. The where is how do governments know where you, the end user, are visiting? What websites do you visit, right? Whether they be tech company websites or, independent third-party websites on the internet. Well, there's a number of ways. In order to explain that, we need to understand how the internet works. So when you connect to the ISP connects you to the internet. The internet is not just one big thing, right? And I'm here splitting the domestic internet, say this is the internet within your country, from the international internet, and I'll explain why in a minute. But the domestic internet is actually a set of networks. Okay, think of each of these globs as a network, right? That all have connectivity to various other networks. So like this network connects to this one does this, does this. And your ISP connects to one of these networks. And this is what we mean by your ISP connects you to the internet. It connects you into this collection of networks that all speak to each other. Okay? And then one of these networks speaks to the ISP that tech companies use. It's not just one ISP, but just as simplifies the illustration, right? And then to this independent site as well. Now, there's a number of ways you can collect the where, right? In the ISP's example, I told you, well, there's DNS traffic that you could sniff to see exactly what websites you're going to. And you can also, if you're using a DNS server, that also can show you. And if you get a copy of the traffic coming in and out of a user's machine, you can see exactly where they're going. There's no ambiguity. That is a precise copy of all the IP addresses that this user is visiting. So how would you potentially collect that at the scale of the entire internet? Well, these points of connection between major networks, okay? These are usually physically connected by high-speed fiber optics. So fiber optic connections, like 100 gig fiber optic connections. We're now seeing 1 terabyte per second fiber optic connections. These are very, very high capacity and then bundled links. Sometimes you'd have multiple links bundled into one big link, right? Connecting these major networks across the domestic internet. And so what certain governments have done is secretly, with court orders that have forced these networks to install this equipment, is install what are known as taps. So a tap, specifically an optical tap, right? There's Ethernet taps too, but an optical tap is effectively a device that sits on an optical cable, okay? So like say you just put some here, put one over here, put one going to Facebook, for example. These optical taps, they see the data going through the light that it's going through that connection, right? Which is translated to data. And they make a copy of that data and send it out to a destination. So everything that's going through that pipe gets copied and sent to a destination. Well, where's that destination? Well, the destination is basically a giant server. And in this case, it's not one server. Usually this is server farms, like, thousands and thousands of servers, huge infrastructure that is designed to capture and store basically, I don't know how many thousands or millions of petabytes of data, but a lot of data. Okay. And so once you've stored that data, what you really have is a set of connections between devices on the internet. You basically have like phone logs for the internet. Think about like phone call logs, like who's talking to who, right? You, this end user, is talking to, this website, and you're talking to a website in China, and you're talking to Facebook, right? And then Facebook is talking to you, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that information is super powerful because you can start building a web of dependencies and connectivity of who's visiting what for what purpose, right? All of that information can be retrieved if you suck up enough data from these high-speed connections. That's exactly what, for example, was revealed that was happening in the US in 2013. This is the Fairview and the Stormbrew programs that were revealed in 2013. The government installed these high-speed taps in major connection points, fiber connection points between networks, sucked up all that data, and then had a record of what was going where. Now, that's a ton of data to sift through. And the example I gave last time was I went in Wireshark and I showed you that. No one's going to go in Wireshark to look at petabytes of data. So what was built is a set of basically analysis tools, right? They call it deep packet inspection for the packet data. That actually allows you, or allows analysts, right? The question is who's analysts, to do searches on this data to look for conversations, or to say, hey, I want to search for this end user. Tell me all the websites they're going to. Tell me every different country they're visiting on the internet. And these analysis tools can sift through huge amounts of data in order to determine that and actually give a very detailed and well-organized response. So effectively, that is how governments are able to know the where. The reason in this example, just to illustrate this, that I gave you, put the international internet into a separate category or a separate cloud, is because usually you have these domestic networks, but there's also international networks, right, that are in different countries around the world. But generally, the interconnectivity between countries is done through a very well-defined set of fiber connections. These are usually like things like subsea cables that go between countries, or they could be terrestrial cables as well. But usually it's a set of defined points where countries will connect. There's actually a map that I'll post in the description that'll show you some of these. And of course, these are prime spots for tapping. And that was actually what was revealed. So the governments can tap these as well. And not only does this show you, they get a full picture of domestic connectivity, but now they're getting international connectivity as well. What's more is that governments can partner with other governments internationally to get a feed of their tap data. So if you have a connection, this government has a relationship with this government in terms of security, they may be saying, hey, you share your tap data with me and I'll share mine with you. Now, they may be not sharing the raw data because it's a ton of data, but they may be sharing all the analytics and analysis that they can get, or just sharing the tools themselves. So that is how the where is determined. Now let's get into the what. What are you doing and how they find out? So now that governments know the where you're connecting, well, how do they know the what? So we explained this last time, explained that your connectivity these days, especially to most modern websites, say you're going to website here, okay, is encrypted end to end, meaning between you and this destination, the traffic itself, the data you're being sent, the images you're downloading, the text that you're generating, the pages you're viewing, that is actually encrypted. There's protocols like TLS, for example, that do that and do a good job at that. And it is effectively, even though there's some debate over things like quantum computing and whether they can decrypt the internet, they're effectively obfuscated from someone who could sniff the traffic. So even though a government can have a tap that is located here, for example, they may not be able to actually read what you're doing. They just know that you're going to this website. Okay, so it's, again, like I said before, depending on what this website is, that may be okay or not, depending on what it is. This could be Google. It could be also like a political website, but it's not as bad. So what governments do instead is something a little bit trickier. Okay. So they do this. The governments partner with tech companies. And partner might not be the word I should be using. They compel the tech companies to provide them data to what users are actually doing on these sites. Okay. This is the basis of the PRISM program in the US, right? That was revealed in 2013 as well. So the logs that are generated when even though this data between here and here is encrypted in flight, well, when it hits the tech company's servers, they know exactly what you're doing because that's where the processing actually happens. And they definitely have logs. Those logs include things like your IP address, your username, your location, and then also like what you're doing, like the content, right? And these programs basically authorized the government from these analysis tools to have basically direct feeds from these tech companies to the analysis tools. Okay, so if tech companies only represented like 5% of the internet, and you had most of the traffic goes to other third-party websites, well, that's not too much of an issue. But how much of your traffic these days, how many of the functions you do online, how many of the chat applications you have are offered by a large tech company today? I mean, chances are it's the majority of them. Tech companies, large tech companies, whether they be domestic in North America or Europe or Asia, there's only a handful, and they continue to gobble up smaller websites every single day. And the knock-on effect of that is that more and more of these websites become part of these large-scale collection programs. So what that means is that, okay, well, now governments who have these like very powerful analysis tools, like this is the tool that was revealed in 2013 was the XKeystore program, which allows you to go in and basically plug in something like an IP address or a keyword, IP address, or keyword, what are the person doing, and then have a whole bunch of data listed out for the analyst to look at. Okay, and who's doing it and where they are. And so with this, you can see how like the complete picture of what users are doing in an entire country is available to a very select few people who have access to the data. They have the what from the tech companies. What are you doing with the IP addresses? And then they have the where from the networks. The network. So the network is providing them from the taps, remember? The where. So you can see really quickly how this becomes a problem. Because ultimately, everything you do, and more, what you're doing, including all the content, is available in one spot. Now, again, I'm not blaming or implicating just one government. You have to assume that every government who has access to technology, this is readily available technology. If you're a network engineer, taps are part of your daily operation. If you don't have taps in your network is very old. These are very common appliances. And then this kind of data analysis, big data analysis, is very common as well. So you have to assume that if the technology exists, that someone has this capability. And so again, just like my last video, my advice to you is not to say, here's how you get around this kind of surveillance. My advice is that the surveillance exists whether you like it or not. And so just be mindful of when you're using the public internet, despite usernames and passwords and encryption, what you're doing is visible to someone. So the question is who that is, and do you trust them? That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions on the topic we've covered, please join the Discord server where we talk all things network. Until next time.